Welcome to this new tutorial. In this one we will create 3 different materials in Unity based on the textures which we created in Blender earlier. We will assign these materials to the robot, then we are going to create a small script using Chat GPT. We are going to assign the script to a button, so when pushing it we can scroll through the different materials. And we can use it for like a sales presentation or just in general showing the different materials on the robot. But that's enough said. Let's go. Let's apply some materials to the robot as we're still working with the clay model. We are going to bring in textures to create materials. We will be creating a metal red and yellow one, but we can extend on this as much as we like. First thing we want to do is head over to the assets folder and create a folder that's going to contain all of our textures that we're going to bring in. So let's call this textures. And to get a little bit organized, let's separate them out in the different materials. So we have the 3 folders available. If you want to expand on the name, you can always use the slider over here. And if you slide it to the left, you can see it becomes available as you can read the names, or you can slide them all the way to the right and it keeps a folder structure. I like to work like this. So we are back now. We can go to the robot metal. Let's create a folder for the first object, which is the base. So I'm creating a base folder inside of the metallic one. Let's open this up. Now let's get our textures that we created earlier. And let me just open them up in File Explorer. So these are the ones that we created for the base, which is the 4 different textures as we follow the metallic workflow. We can just select them, drag and drop them inside of the folder. And let me just move this out of the way. And there we have the base. So we brought in the textures for the base. Now we're going to create the material. And I like to create a new folder for this to keep them separated. So the folder is going to be materials. Inside the materials, I can do the same thing. Let's create one for the robot metal. This is a personal preference. You can also put them all together in one folder. It really depends on the way you like to work. But we're going to do it like this. Now we need to create the material. We can create the materials in 2 ways. The first thing is head over all the way to the top, click on assets, then click on create, and then head over to materials. That's the first one, and we can rename it. And let's call this base. And I'm going to put, just for references, I'm going to put metal behind it. It's because we're going to have multiple ones later on. But you can also use the right-hand mouse button, then select create and then select material. That's the same. If we click on the material, all the properties become available on the right-hand side. As you can see, we can drop the textures in here. The only one which is missing at the moment is the roughness. And that's because we have the standard selected. We need to head over here and select Autodesk Interactive. Then we have a roughness map available as well. We now have all the slots available and we can drag and drop the textures in. So let me zoom out first. So what we can do is the first one is a diffuse or the color one or albedo. Let's drop it in. Then we got the metallic one. Let's drop it in the metallic slot. We got the normal one. Let's drop that in the normal map. And we have the roughness. And we have all 4 of them. Now we want to apply the material to the robot. So let's head over to the material. And the material is going to be applied, but not in the game view, but in the scene view. So let's drag and drop it. And there we are. So that's how it works. And you can zoom in to review the material. Let's do the second one, which is the axis 1. Let's add the material to the first axis, which is this part here. And if you look at the right hand side, you can see that the mesh renderer, which is right here, contains 1 material already, which came in by default, which is the default material. But we want to make this a new material. So right hand mouse button, create, go to material. And this is going to be our axis 1. And I'm going to add metal, as we are going to put those in different material slots later on. We are going to drop this onto the axis 1. So if you select it now, we can see that the material has changed to axis 1 metal. Now we're going to insert the textures to create the material, which is here. Then create folder. This is going to be axis 1. I'm going to add metal, but that's not really necessary. Entering the folder, getting hold of the textures. There they are. Let me select all 4 of them, drag and drop them. And let's zoom in a little bit to see what's happening. If you want to zoom in real close, because if I do it like this, it opens up. Hold the Alt button and click your middle mouse button and you can scroll into great detail. Then select the material, which is obviously metal 1. And now we are going to apply the different textures. So the first one is the color one. Let's just drop it in there. There we go. That's just for the color. And you can see the colors come in nicely. Then we're going to add the metallic. That's going to be the shiny part. So this is going to show the model where it should be shiny and where it should not be. There we go. Then the normal. Now the details come in. This is the normal map and I gotta fix it. And right away you can see that the dents that we created in the previous tutorial already come in, including the scratches on top of the motors and so on. And the last one obviously is the roughness, but I need to change this to the Autodesk Interactive. Then dragging the roughness in there. There you go. And that's the second material that we have applied. We can play with the lighting to see what it looks like. We can also adjust the value for the normal map, so we can make it extremely dented, like making a value of 10, or we can play with the value. I'll leave it at 1 for the moment. And this is basically how we can apply all the textures to the model. Let me speed this up and I'll apply the rest of the textures. I finished putting the materials on the robot on all the parts. I also put the light in a little bit closer to let the materials pop a little bit better. We can do some more work with the lighting, but since this is an AR app, we'll leave it at this. But if I zoom out, you can see this whole robot has been textured. I also did apply the other textures. So if we zoom in to the bottom, we can see that the textures are stored in the folders metal, red and yellow. And I put them in subfolders just for easy reference. So in the yellow folder, there are the ones for the base and for the axis 1 and so on. But we will be working with the materials. So for the red metal, and that's where all the materials are in. For the red, the same here. And then for the yellow. At the moment, if we select this part and let me zoom out again, we can see that, let me just put the full robot in here. If we select this part, we can see that the mesh renderer has been attached. It contains one material, which is the axis 1 metal. We also have an axis 1 red and an axis 1 yellow. And by a push of a button, we want to scroll through these different materials. For this, we need a little script, and let's head over to Chat GPT to create this. Here we are at Chat GPT, and let's state our question. It's Unity, change the materials on the model from an array with a single button click. After the code has been generated, we have the script right here, which we're gonna need, and we need the part of the script which is up here. Let's copy both of them, this one, and let's head over to Unity to insert the script. Back in Unity, let's change to the scripts folder. These are the scripts we created already. Let's create a new one. So right-hand mouse button, create, and create a C# script. Let's call this change materials. And let's open this up in Visual Studio. Here we are at the script. We can delete the start and the update function as we do not need it. But we need an array of materials. In our case, we have the metal, yellow and red, which we want to store in an array. So we're going to call this a public, as we want to be able to access this in the hierarchy. We call this material. That's what we want. We want an array. And this is how we indicate an array. And let's call this mods. This is our variable. So let me just type this behind it. So these are the different materials. In our case, we have 3 materials where we can add as many as we like. Then we need a number to run through this array. So starting at 0, in our case, running up to 2, but we can have as many as we like. This is a private. Let's use an integer and let's call this current item. So that's going to support us running through the array, and let's start with a value of 0. So this is our scrolling number running through the array. But we want to assign the material to the mesh renderer, which we have not done, so we can do this on top. We want to access this as well, so it's a public. We call this mesh renderer, and let's give it the same name, mesh renderer. And this is the object on which the material is applied. There we have the 3 variables. So let's write our function. It's going to be a public void. It doesn't return anything. It's just going to scroll through the array of materials. Let's call this next material and make this a function. Then we're going to put the code between the brackets. There we are. And let's indent it. So we want the current item, which starts at 0, to run through the array. So we're going to have the current item plus 1. Then we want the modulus operation of the total length of the array, which is mets.length. And once we have the correct number, we want the new material to be applied. So in this case, that's going to be the mesh renderer dot material. That's the material we got, equals the material from the database or from the array. So the current item. There we are. So what this does is apply the new material. In this case, we do have a new operator, which is the modulus. And let's just dive in quickly to see what it does and how it scrolls through the array. We have an array consisting of 3 materials, which are identified through the numbers 0, 1 and 2, as arrays always start with 0. In our code, we have current item equal to current item plus 1 and the remainder of match length, or the length of the array, in our case 3 entries. Let's take a look at what would happen when we do not include the remainder operator, but just scroll through the array, adding 1 after each entry. With the first entry, we have 0. We add 1, which gives a total of 1. So we move to the next entry, red metal. With the next entry, we have 1 again. And we add 1, so we get 2. And we move to the next entry again, in our case, yellow metal. All is working fine at this moment. With the last entry, we get 2, and adding 1 again, we get 3. But now we run into a problem, as our array does not have a third entry. It will now throw an index out of range exception error. Then we want to introduce the remainder operator. But before we introduce it, let's take a quick look at the definition, as this will compute the remainder, or what is left, after trying to divide 2 numbers left to right, and this is done only with whole numbers. Or in other words, the numbers need to fit entirely before the remainder is calculated. So let's clean up what we've got and start over again, now adding the remainder operator. We start with the first entry again, being 0, we add 1 and we get 1 again. We will now add the remainder operator, which is 3, as we have 3 entries. We cannot fit 3 into 1, so we have 0 for the equation, but we have 1 left, so we have a remainder of 1. And this brings us to the next entry, or the red metal. The second entry has a value of 1, adding 1 gives us 2. Again, we cannot fit 3 into 2, so the equation is 0, but we have 2 left. So we have a value of 2. This makes us move to the third entry, or the yellow metal. The third entry gives us a value of 2, adding 1 gives us 3. We can fit 3 into 3 of the match length, or the array length, giving us an equation value of 1 with nothing left, so the remainder is 0. And this brings us back to the first entry, the value of 0. In Unity, we can select the object that we want the script to apply to. We need to select the different objects for the different materials. We are just going to drag and drop the script we just wrote. What it shows here is the mesh renderer, which we made available as a public function. So we can just drag and drop this object inside. So we got the mesh renderer, which actually is up here. And we can say how many materials we like. We want 3. In this case, it's the metal, yellow and red. And we can drag and drop those in. So if you go to the materials tab, so in the robot metal, we have the base metal. Let's just drag and drop this one in. And then we want the red one. So the base red is going to be here. And the yellow one, I'm going to drag and drop over here. And this is why I added the metal, red and yellow at the end of the file name. So you can see the different materials are now present. Having done that, now we need to assign this to the button that we have. So let's go into the canvas. We can select the button. Pressing on the F key will take us to the graphical user interface, which is projected on top of the camera view. So it's much larger than the model itself. We have the on-click event. Then we're going to just add one. We are going to drag and drop the base object in here. And then in the function, we see it's a game object with a transform, the mesh filter, mesh renderer. And here is our script, change materials, and we want next material. So for the base, we have done this. Now we can test our script, just push the play button. We see our robot here. Pushing the button will scroll through the database and get back to 0. So this is the start, this is for the red one, and this is for the yellow one. Let's do the same thing for the rest of the axis, and I'll get back once everything is done. So if you look at the button materials has an on-click event on them. Here is the script. So the individual axes, including the base, are listed here. This is the drag and drop function. And for each and every one, we got the change material, next material function in place. Having said all that, let's start the game and see if everything works. Inside of the game view, we can toggle this button to scroll through the array of materials. Pressing it will take us to the red material. Pressing it again will take us to the yellow material. And by pressing again, takes us back to the start, which is the metal material. And we can even have it rotate and animate, and we can change the materials during the rotation animation just to get a better view. So we assigned a script to all the different objects correctly. Everything seems to work perfectly, and that's it for this tutorial.